Hello everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you, Gloria, for this incredible story. Enjoy listening.
How to defeat the disease. Hope is the best medicine. I was sometimes scared, horrified, desperately ill, but even then I knew perfectly well that being alive was the best thing in the world. Agatha Christie, author. On the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, I woke up in terrible pain. No one even remembered the presents, because we rushed to the hospital. They took a bunch of tests and sent me to my room. My blood platelet count was 3,300, while a healthy person should have more than 150,000. A few days later I was told the diagnosis: leukemia. More specifically, acute undifferentiated lymphoblastic leukemia with a Philadelphia chromosome 7. The disease in this form develops very quickly, so I had to be treated as soon as possible. I couldn't understand how my back and chest pains had turned into cancer. I was scheduled for a transplant and transferred to a hospital in another city where such operations were performed. Before that, I hadn't spent a single night away from my 6-year-old son. How do I tell him that I may very well have to be in the hospital for months? How do I tell him that his mother may never come back from the hospital at all? What words can I use to explain this to my child? Or myself? It was winter, in the middle of a flu epidemic, so my son was not allowed to visit me. My husband couldn't stay with me for long. He had to go home and take care of the baby. I would lie there watching TV reruns, sadly thinking that maybe I wouldn't get to see my son grow up. At the time, that was what saddened me more than anything else in the world. I had always loved to read and write, but I was on various medications that made me completely unable to concentrate. I was desperate. I had lost not only my health and my family, but also my ability to think. My God, what else could they take away from me? If I had only had chemotherapy, my chances of survival would have been 20%. A bone marrow transplant would increase my chances of survival to 30 or even 50%. In that case, however, there was a 20% chance that the transplanted bone marrow would not take and I would die anyway. I considered myself a hostage to these numbers, which embodied the danger I was in. The hospital could only do bone marrow transplants if my health insurance covered them. There was a TV news program about a man who had government insurance, but the insurance company refused to pay for the surgery and he died. I saw the story just as I was waiting to hear back from my insurance company. If I had sold everything I owned, my house, my car, and even my clothes, I still wouldn't have had enough money for the surgery. Fortunately, my husband's work provided health insurance for family members. At one time, I chose the most expensive option. As it turned out, it covered the cost of the surgery. Now I had to find a donor. My sister was tested, but the results showed that she could not be a donor. Our brother disappeared from the horizon right after our mother died of ovarian cancer, and we didn't know anything about him for over a decade. But my niece found him online, and he flew in from Washington. Not only that, he offered to move in with me to take care of me after the surgery. It turned out that my illness brought my brother back to us. I was very happy to see him again. But it turned out that he couldn't be my donor either. So, I needed an anonymous donor. My parents were of different races, and people like me have the hardest time finding a donor. Sometimes they don't succeed, and they, alas, die. So I began to prepare for death. In sheer desperation, I once asked my oncologist if there was any hope for my recovery. "There is always hope," he said. And he was right. They found me a donor. I had to undergo chemotherapy before the transplant. I was injected directly into my spine. I was biopsied by sticking a huge needle into my vertebrae to take out some of my spinal cord for analysis. You probably never thought about the fact that you can't anesthetize or freeze a bone. The pain was scary. There were times when I thought I couldn't take it. But I did. I got through it all by posting funny and sad video blogs on the web. Strangers would leave comments about how inspiring these videos were. One morning I woke up, lifted my head, and most of my hair was left on my pillow. I wrote a haiku and posted it along with a picture of me lying bald and smiling ear to ear. Then I asked my son to paint my head with felt-tip pens so he wouldn't be afraid of my new look. I was in remission, and my bone marrow was given to me through a simple blood transfusion, or transfusion. It was very painful. They gave me a morphine drip, and I couldn't eat. After the transfusion there were complications, so I spent another 4 days in the hospital. It was probably one of the most difficult periods of my life. I just had to survive then, and I struggled. Every morning I did as much exercise as I could. I imagining my son graduating from high school. If it were possible to survive on willpower alone, I would definitely do it. During my time in the hospital, I lost a lot of strength. I had trouble walking across the room. One day my legs suddenly gave out. I was standing in the doorway and fell down so that I blocked the way and no one could come near me. I had to crawl to the side so people could help me. My nose was bleeding incessantly for 3 hours before the operation. There was a strange sensation that my facial muscles had stopped responding to me. I looked at myself in the mirror. There were gauze swabs in my nostrils, abrasions on my arms from the fact that my blood had too few platelets, bruises under my eyes. The nurse asked me what was wrong. I said, "The first rule of wrestling club," and laughed. It was actually pretty grim and scary, but I tried to take everything that was going on with a smile, a prayer, and tears. My husband helped me shower, and I joked that we hadn't showered together since our honeymoon. I learned to walk on the wall or hold on to something so I wouldn't fall. But when I did fall and my son helped me up, I called him a hero and noticed that he was awfully happy about the praise. I began to walk, farther and farther each day. My body was growing stronger and stronger. Shortly after I was discharged, my father died suddenly. His death was a terrible blow to me. I wasn't feeling well, so I didn't see him for several months. I knew that tears could not help grief and that the emotional suffering would not help my own recovery. So I decided to remember the last time we celebrated Christmas together. I am glad that before my father died, I was able to tell him over the phone that the transplant was successful and that I was recovering. It had been a year since I had been in the hospital. It was Christmas time again. It was time to move on from survival to normal human life. I was determined not to think about the pain and complications, but rather to thank fate for what I was so unspeakably lucky to have: the support of family and friends, the return of my prodigal brother, and the generosity of the stranger who became my donor and gave me life. It's been 3 years. We are saving money to go to Disney World. My son is excited about our trip to the Grand Canyon. I have finished writing my second novel and am working closely with Be the Match, 8. I have now stopped seeing Christmas as a tragic time of my illness. I have endured, overcome the hardships that have befallen me, and consider myself perfectly happy.